for them, it might appear that the end of their life is when they come out, right? Would they believe it?
That's an evolutionary thing. That's these genes which you see them in one action. That's a product of millions and millions.
Are you following what I'm saying? Are you following?
Mutation and transformation.
I understand gene theory.
Realize they just discovered just this week they discovered a creature. They had 3 eyes rather than 2, 3 eyes.
None of this.
What does that mean?
None of this is remotely relevant.
The selection. This is what's happened. You know, this one he couldn't do that. He couldn't recognize them. They didn't survive.
But none of this is. Are you able to handle philosophical dialogue at all? Is it pointless? Do you understand the concept of the thought experiment of twins in a womb and whether or not they can establish if there is a life beyond the womb? Do you understand the point of the thought experiment? Because obviously saying something about evolutionary proteins is obviously totally irrelevant to that thought experiment, right?
What do you mean life beyond the womb?
So these 2 twins, right? They're in the mother's womb, and imagine they can communicate with each other, and the only life they've ever known is inside that womb, right? And all of their experiments, all of their empirical data is all from inside that womb. And they're hypothesizing, do you think there exists life beyond this life? Do you think there exists some life beyond the womb? Do you believe in the mother, right? How would they, given their framework that they're in, how would they establish the existence of life outside the womb?
They don't.
Right. And so the reason I'm saying this is because the analogy is here, right? In this life here. Because you asked a question about whether there could be life after this life.
That's a logical fallacy.
How's it a logical fallacy?
Because you're applying something entirely irrelevant, entirely very primitive to something very advanced.
No, because it couldn't be a fallacy.
Those in the womb, they don't have a logical reason. They don't have understanding.
I don't think you followed the thought experiment. I don't think you followed the thought experiment, and I don't think you followed why making an analogy means you can't call it a logical fallacy, because I didn't say A follows B follows C because of this. So let's take things another direction, because obviously the philosophical stuff doesn't work so well. What science did you study? I did theoretical physics. Which one did you study?
Biology.
Sorry?
Biology.
Okay, you studied evolutionary biology. Excellent. Okay. So do you know one of the names of Allah is Al-Batin, which is often translated as the evolver?
What?
One of the names of Allah is often translated as the evolver. You know this? The evolver, the one who evolves things.
Tell me the Arabic one.
Al-Batin.
Al-Batin?
Yeah.
Batin doesn't mean evolver.
It's one of the common translations of it.
I mean, something internal, something inside the batin.
Shaping and modifying things, yes.
Batin is nothing to do with the evolution.
You can...
And it's not evolution. Batin in Arabic, evolution, they call it tatawwur.
Yes, I'm aware of that as well.
Tatawwur is one of Allah's names?
No, but I'm wondering if you're aware of the fact that Allah shaping, you know of him as shaping and forming things, right? You know this one?
Shaping and forming.
He's the one who shapes and forms things, you know this?
Well, not shaping and forming, they create things.
Creation is a separate name, yeah, Khalik, yeah.
Yeah, well, these names.
It's important, right? And I'll tell you why.
One word, one name can't explain the complexity of a subject.
I think if you stop imagining that you know where I'm going, we'll be able to have a dialogue that works.
Well, because you don't know where you're going. That's the trouble.
I know where I'm. No, you don't know where I'm going.
You're trying to make a comparison between an unborn baby to a fully grown. You know what I mean? That's in comparison. You can't make a comparison.
I didn't make.
That's a logical fallacy.
I didn't make a fallacy. I was making an analogy. I was making an analogy for the sake of a philosophical dialogue, and you are unable to do that, and that's fine. So we move to something else, right?
Unable to do what?
Can you allow me to even? Can you even allow a sentence to come out of my mouth? No. Right. So Allah Subhanahu wa Taala, right? He modifies and shapes things. If you don't believe that, fine, but it's one of his names. The point I'm getting to, right, is that evolutionary biology, first written about by Al-Jahiz 900 years before Darwin.
Well, that's debatable.
It's not remotely debatable.
No.
His treatise, again, you jumped in, you can't let me finish anything, can you?
Can I just correct you?
No,
just educate you.
You could let me finish what I'm saying and see if your correction is even valid, but you can't even do that. Can you even let me finish what I'm saying and see if the correction is valid?
Please.
Right? He wrote a book.
But you have to give me a chance to talk because
Afterward,
you just keep talking.
Oh, I didn't even get a sentence out and you're jumping in.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
Al-Jahis wrote a book, on nature, which included selection, right? Which included, and bearing in mind this is a Muslim in the Islamic Empire, which included selection, included speciation, all this kind of stuff, right?
You finished?
Now, the last thing I was going to say is it was at least as, if not more detailed, than Darwin's original notes.
You are absolutely wrong.
Okay.
Absolutely
Prove me wrong.
They believed in the things that what you call the spontaneous generation. Do you know Biruni?
Who's
Biruni?
they? Sorry.
Biruni,
yeah.
Leading Islamic scholar. Okay.
That's not Al-Jahis.
Biruni, without doubt, he's one of the leaders. Guess what he said snakes came from? He said snake comes from woman's hair, long hair, is fallen inside of dirty mud.
Where's your references?
Do you want me to show you the reference? I'll show you the reference.
No, you can just say the reference and we can look it up later.
There's a paper written about. Just search for the spontaneous generation among Islamic scholars.
Okay,
just search that.
Okay, so if we grant that is true, right? Then even under that, is that a problem with the Muslim or with Islam? Where's the problem?
Well, no, you pointed out. You said that this is the Islam talked about evolution.
No. You see, no, I'm not. You don't know what I'm saying. What I'm saying, the reason I made that point about Al-Jahis is because there is not a fundamental incompatibility between evolution and Islam.
Yes.
There is not.
Yes.
There is not.
Yes.
There's no incompatibility.
Evolution, it doesn't say that first there's such thing as a first human, and it doesn't say as human came from the dirty mud.
Right. Hang on a minute. So the only incompatibility is to do with the relationship of chance. Yes.
That's evolution doesn't says that.
There's not incompatibility.
It is incompatible. It says all of you from Adam, and Adam is from from mud.
Does it say Adam was the only thing made from mud?
Well, does that matter?
No, because you're adding in your own things.
Yeah, this is if you say something, that's your interpretation. Because we have got the lots of
No, here's the difference.
All of you, all of you. It says all of you.
No, here's the difference. I'm not adding in my own assumptions. You are. That's the difference.
No, it says Adam wa Adam min al-turab.
Yeah, so you're right. But I asked you, does that mean nothing else was made from turab?
Well, it says, what do you mean nothing?
Does it mean that only Adam was made from turab?
Well, the very concept of made from turab is absolutely wrong.
Were other things made from light or only angels? Angels made from light, right? You know this from Nur?
I don't believe angels.
Right, but no, it doesn't matter because obviously things other than angels are also made. Things other than angels, in the Islamic view, things other than angels are also made of light, right? So things other than Adam also made of mud, right? And when you say,
what do you mean that's wrong? You studied physical. You studied at university, and that's what he's saying. He's saying that came from mud. That's absolutely absurd. Please, have shown some respect to that topic you studied, physics.
We're not on the subject of physics yet. I'd be even happier to go to physics if you want to go to physics. But the thing is, you don't even understand the basic idea that there's an analogy be given. Now, obviously, the turabin doesn't literally mean there's nothing but there was just light, smokeless fire and mud, and that was all that existed. That's no one's taken that to be what the Quran is saying, except maybe you. The idea.
That's what it says.
The idea. But it's not literally mud. It's a specific kind of clay. A lot of people go into a lot more detail on this.
Well, scientifically, we are not created from mud.
What materials? Hydrocarbons, right?
Well, no.
What's the material? So we're minerals and hydrocarbons, are we not? What do you find in mud? Minerals and hydrocarbons.
We are product of circumstances, not just organic matter, that's not the mud. We came from specific, very suitable environment, earth, where liquid water and all the things came together to create, bring.
This is the concept of
amino acid and molecular.
That abiogenesis isn't.
Nucleic acid and kind
that
of.
abiogenesis is the theory about how the first cells came together,
It's not a
which
theory.
is.
There's lots of scientific experiment.
Are you saying it's not a theory?
It's not just a theory. No,
It is a theory.
it's not just a theory.
I didn't say just. I'm asking you whether or not it's a theory. Do you understand the difference between theory and fact?
Gravity is a theory.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
Does that mean gravity is not existent?
It depends. It depends what exactly you mean by gravity.
Well, the gravity that the one
Is Newtonian gravity a fact?
Well, what do you mean the fact?
Is Newtonian gravity, is it a fact?
Yeah, the general thing, yes.
Newtonian gravity, is it a fact?
Well, there is a modification by Einstein which says the gravity is
a modification?
Yes.
No, it's a complete replacement with an entirely different. Yeah, it is.
We use Newtonian gravity. The Newtonian thing.
We do. Because Newtonian gravity still works. It's a model that works. It doesn't tell you anything about ontological reality.
That's what the science is about. Science
exactly. So what you're doing, so you have the logical fallacy of conflating the map with the territory. You're looking at the map and pretending it's the territory. This is the whole problem. This is why we can't have a detailed dialogue.
Newton never said exactly what the gravity. In fact, he has got a quotation which says he's puzzled about this force. What is that?
This was why he was a good scientist, because he realized that we can only do maps. We don't know the territory via the maps.
He noticed that this gravity, it happens. It is real. That's what Newton did. Newton never said, "Oh, I know and decide." In fact, he has got. Do you know what
Newton's logic was? And lo, so it is on Earth as it is in the heavens. That was entire logical connection between the two types of masses.
Yeah,
that was it. Right? Because the point is, all he's doing, and this is what you need to understand and do not understand about science, any of them, is that it only works in the space of models, and the map is not the territory. But you are unable to tell the difference between map and a territory. Once you've got an idea of the map...
The model is something, but in the religious concept, the religious aspect, they don't have that model.
No.
They don't have any
false.
model.
Absolutely false. Absolutely false. The thing is, the Islamic model and the other scientific models both map to the same underlying reality. Right?
Reality?
The underlying actual objective
of jinn, of angels, of Jibreel having a 700 wings.
Yeah, all part of the natural order. Yeah.
Natural order.
Yeah. You see, because you can take an alternative. I don't know if you'll be able to follow this.
700 wings.
I don't know if you'll be able to follow this, but let's try. Right. You could take an epistemology. You know what an epistemology is? Okay, so you can take an epistemology where you start with order on the one hand and chaos on the other, which would be the angels and the jinn. And then you have Alma, you know this one? Yeah? So this is basically this sort of fluid-like substance.
What do you understand of chaos?
Sorry?
What do you understand of chaos?
Well, I mean, I understand it pretty well. Non-linear systems, emergent dynamics, all this kind of stuff. I've studied it quite extensively,
Can you define the chaos for me, please?
Can I define chaos? Not in a short way. No, it's too complicated. Because you have a real... Because you have... I'll tell you why. Because you have this, say for example, pure absolute chaos, where there's exactly no relationship between anything whatsoever. But what we typically mean by chaos is actually a system of non-linear interacting things, which means that we don't have the ability to solve those equations, which means we have to go to some linearization or some simplification or some perturbation theory, right?
The chaos is within the limit. The chaos is one level slower than complexity.
Going back to gravity, the three-body problem, right?
Yeah,
so three-body problem, you already have chaos there, in one form of chaos. So what do you mean by chaos? Are we talking about the three-body problem where we can't tell which orbit it's going to jump onto when it's over a saddle point? Or are we talking...
closer to getting, better model, better...
No, hang on, no, this is the problem, is fundamentally, it doesn't matter how small your dx gets, you're never going to be able to tell which trajectory it's going to jump off from a saddle point. This is the whole thing. You know Poincaré, how he got to this? Right. So I don't know. This is like one end of chaos, right? This is your stepping in, and then the other end of chaos is like imagining not even the Mandelbrot set. I mean, even like one end of chaos is basically like Dedekind cuts all the way down, and no relationship between which point you're in next time. You know, Dedekind cuts.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So chaos is basically anything in between, anything like that, where we don't know what the functional relationships are. That's all it really is. Right? And so when people say order, immersion, chaos and stuff, they already don't know how this stuff works. And this is the problem they make in biology, right? Is where they say, oh, it's proven, it's a fact that things come from this. It's like you can't calculate the probabilities. So you can't say this is more probable. And the thing is,
it's not a probability, it's just things happen under the observation, direct observation.
They're not direct observations.
It is direct observation.
You don't have direct observations a million years ago. You don't.
We have. For 25 years, they observe bacteria how change.
Yeah,
they
of course.
observe other animals
Yeah.
how they change.
Of course.
So if the change happens naturally.
Yeah, but those observations are not observations of a million years ago. Was anyone around to observe a million years ago?
Yeah, but we have found out that.
Yeah, so remember the map.
Missing.
Remember the map territory. Oh, well, like Lucy. That's hilarious.
Well,
you know how.
you call that hilarious.
Okay, this Lucy. Now imagine I was to go to a graveyard and only dig up midgets, right?
It's not just Lucy.
Would I then be able to say it's a different species?
Have you got knowledge about this?
How long did it take them to discover that Lucy's thyroid was actually from a baboon? Sorry, the thoracic vertebrae.
Well, Lucy.
How long did it take them to discover that one of the bones they thought was part of the skeleton was actually from a baboon? How long did that take?
Well, there might have been mistakes.
Okay, maybe mistakes.
No, Lucy is not the only fossils.
No, I
There's
know.
a dozen of like Lucy.
No, they're not. They're not. There's dozens of small pieces from all over the place, and they put them together and give people the impression that it's Lucy is the only remotely complete one.
They dug the same area, and they found a connection.
Yeah, which is why I gave you the analogy of digging up a graveyard and only picking midgets.
Smallfoot fossil.
Huh?
Smallfoot fossil.
Yeah.
A fossil called Smallfoot.
Yeah.
Discovered in South Africa.
Yeah. How many pieces were actually together in the same being?
Yeah, all of it. All of it. It was in a bedrock.
Yeah.
All of it. It took this guy, the paleontology who take it. It took him 30 years to separate the bones from the rock.
You're missing the point, because the identification of one substantially distinct thing. This is why I say dwarfism, right? You understand dwarfs exist as part of human species, yeah?
Yeah.
Right. So finding one that's different, right? Now, a future paleontologist could dig up a bunch of humans, from a graveyard, and they find one dwarf, and they could say, whole different species.
It's not just a dwarf. The structure of the face is different. The teeth are different.
There are plenty of syndromes.
Besides, it's not just humans who dwarf in that.
There are plenty of syndromes.
And elephant, she called it dwarfism.
Yeah.
Elephant has got small on that island.
Yes,
and
of course. But the point is, because the difference is, right, I'm saying, yes, of course you expect to see variations, but to claim that we know for a fact it's a different species when you can't even pull genetics from them is a logical fallacy. You don't. How do you have genes that lasted that long? No, not Neanderthals. I'm not asking about Neanderthals. No, from Lucy. Where's the genetic material from Lucy?
It's too long.
Of course. So why are you denying when I say we don't have their genetics?
Because just because we don't have that one, it doesn't mean
but don't deny it. When I say we don't have the genetics, just admit it and say we don't.
What about the gene we have bred from Denisovan?
Stop jumping all over the place. Stick with at least one thing. Lucy, for example, we don't have the genetics. All we're going on is pulling together different pieces of things that look like they're a different shape.
How long DNA will survive in a body?
Not nearly long enough for Lucy to work.
Exactly.
I know we won't have the genetics. Can you follow any comprehensive thought at all?
How old was Lucy?
I think from memory it's supposed to be 800,000, 900,000 years, something like that.
Absolutely wrong.
Even longer?
Yeah, absolutely
How
wrong.
long?
Lucy was 3.2 million.
Oh, she was a longer
years.
one. Yeah. But it doesn't change. It doesn't. The point is.
It does because DNA doesn't survive.
I know it doesn't. That was my whole point. Seriously, the point was you're pretending like we have evidence of speciation, where you in order to have that you would have to have different genetics. And the whole point is your evidence of different speciation at those times is equivalent to digging up a cemetery, finding a dwarf and saying that's a different species, where in fact they're a human.
You don't dig the cemetery.
You do dig cemeteries.
This is all the layer is been
I'm
dated.
well aware of that.
It's been dated.
What you're missing, fundamentally, is you have a map that you made where you project your own beliefs on a priori, and then you map that onto the territory, and then you say, this proves my a priori beliefs.
It's not just from one thing. It's not just from the several people that got Nobel Prize on that, on the evolutionary, the live evolution.
But you're missing the point. I believe that Allah made these things, all of the things that exist that we find. I believe Allah.
Why are you saying that?
Because you would know if you let me say anything, but all you can do is think you know where I'm going, jump in head, and say things that make you look foolish.
You criticize it.
You are imagining my argument. You don't know my argument. I believe these things exist. I believe there is a different theoretical foundation, and we haven't even got there because you won't even let us get to a reasonable dialogue.
Evolution. Do you believe in evolution?
What do you mean by that?
What do you mean this? We have got only one.
Do you know how many different variations there are on evolution theory?
Natural selection.
When you say natural selection, let me tell you where I differ. Let's see if you can let me get one sentence out.
Okay.
Where we differ is, I believe Allah does the selection. You believe you have randomness happens. I believe Allah does the selection. That's our difference. Now, you're trying to tell me you have evidence it's not Allah. You're trying to tell me you have evidence it can happen without Allah. You're trying to tell me something you have no evidence for, that you don't even have scientific basis for.
Selection doesn't happen now. You misunderstood the concept of selection. Selection.
Where have I misunderstood that?
Yeah, the misunderstanding. You're thinking these things has been selected by some sort of external force.
I'm not misunderstanding nothing.
The survival of the fittest.
Yeah.
Animal can't survive, can't do the birth.
Let's at least be remotely more accurate and say it's survival of the optimal.
Can't reproduce enough babies, so for that reason they die out.
Survival of the
That's a selection.
You must have understood that even survival of the fittest is too oversimplified. Survival of various optimization parameters. So there's supposed to be, right, that okay, you have a bunch of things, and then certain variations means this particular one's more likely to survive, which means the other ones die off, and eventually, a bunch of these things appear, and eventually something is then different enough that it can no longer mate with the other ones, and so we call it a different species. I understand all of this, obviously, right? Because you don't know where we're differing. You have just projected onto me from the beginning.
Yeah, but you say Allah does that.
I'm saying there's two different theories, right? At least as far as we're concerned. One is that it can happen autonomously without the need of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the other is that it's what we are observing what Allah does. Those are the two positions.
Well, the scientists discovered the first one.
No, they didn't.
Yeah, they have.
No,
the
scientists. They haven't.
They made clear observation. They noticed.
But how do you know? How are you determining the difference between Allah doing it and Allah not doing it? How are you telling that?
You are not just scientifically in trouble. You are philosophically in trouble as well. So that's means Allah is responsible.
You don't know that. You don't know where I'm going.
Allah is responsible for SARS-CoV-19. So you're saying Allah was responsible for bringing about this virus?
Every single electron that moves is under His control. Everything.
Well, that's your belief, which is I do respect what you believe. But scientifically, it's absolutely wrong.
No, it's not. No, because this is again what you don't understand the fundamental difference, and in fact, you obviously don't understand Islam that you're supposed to have left, because you're not able to give. Right? I understand. Right? Well, you say that, but you don't seem to understand how Muslims believe Allah operates.
Yes.
You don't, because you've been arguing against me as if I'm a Christian the whole time.
Let you go to the Islamic sources and find out how they believe.
So
they believe in
Allah is in control of everything, right? All the time.
That's the thing.
Full control.
Well, that's the trouble with Islam, because they have got a problem with the al-mukhayyar wal-musayyar. They haven't solved that problem. Do you understand that? Al-mukhayyar wal-musayyar.
I don't understand why you have a problem, but also you're jumping.
No, you're saying that
fundamentally, we have two different positions. I have good reasons for believing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is managing everything. And for me, you're not going to differentiate that based on the evidence we find in fossil records, based on genetics, based on watching fruit flies evolve or anything like that, right? Because all you're doing is you're watching how Allah does it and you're attributing it to something else. It's just basic polytheism.
It's not to something
and when you
else,
say it is
what has been observed.
No, it's not.
Scientists, they just observe.
Yeah.
And they see there's no hand of Allah or any God or anything like that in these changes. It happens because of the mutation. It happens because of the survival.
No, they're
fittest.
watching the things Allah does happen. And that's all they have. All they have is the map, and you pretend that the map is a territory. This is the problem. You can't tell the difference between the map and the territory.
You know, your argument is like this philosopher who was arguing, he was giving an example, what's his name, about the invisible dragon, okay? He was saying that I've got a dragon, but it's invisible. They say, okay, we could measure the temperature. They say, oh, actually, the temperature as well.
No, because that'd be infrared radiation.
That's another logical policy. Each time when you're going to say, okay, let me prove
I'm not making the logical fallacies you think I am.
You go further back to say, no, yeah, we can't prove that Allah is doing because Allah work in the mysterious way.
I'm not in any way making God of the gaps.
Show me how Allah does it.
Sorry?
Show me how Allah is does it.
The whole point of this discussion has been able to say, in the domain that you claim...
you believe in that. Allah
hang
is
on.
doing the selection.
Hang on. You need to let me... You keep jumping over me before I'm allowed to even finish half a sentence.
No, you see, I just asked
you. But the thing is, you ask me and then you just jump over me the whole time.
Okay.
You'll never get the answer. And this is what you seem to be trying to doing, is preventing my view from even being presented to you.
Answering the question.
I will if you let me, but you won't let me.
Okay, I'm listening.
Right? The whole point of this discussion is that in the domain where you're willing to look in evolutionary biology, you are not going to find sufficient distinction between your hypothesis for the observations and my hypothesis for the observations. You do not have sufficient distinction between your hypothesis and my hypothesis. You promised you were going to let me say something, and again you're jumping in. They're fundamentally, in that specific domain, there is not any, even in principle, observation you could ever do in that domain that could differentiate between your hypothesis and my hypothesis. That should be obvious.
You finished?
Okay, respond to that one.
Okay, you're absolutely wrong, because we do have observations. We know how it happens. We know what how mutation changes the virus and the bacteria.
So we know how Allah does things in more detail. And what?
We don't have any evidence.
Yeah, we know how Allah does things in more detail. And what?
You don't have any evidence.
We know even more. You don't have any evidence for what you're claiming.
You're jumping on my conversation as well. You don't let me finish. You don't let me finish. Okay, you had a chance to talk, but you're not giving me a chance to talk.
Go on then.
You're jumping in, but you're jumping in.
Because you're doing the same thing. Where you keep projecting on me something I'm not doing.
You don't have any evidence to show that Allah does that mutation or do that. You don't have any evidence of that.
Am I allowed to respond yet?
What the scientists have observed is that this mutation, this change happens randomly. And what is controlling that, who do the best, who survives, is called the survival of the fittest. One of the creatures that can reproduce enough, that will survive. If they don't do enough, they will die out. There's something called extinction.
And like I said earlier, the fact is, where we actually differ, the only place we actually can try and maybe test something is whether or not it is random, provably random, right? And that means it couldn't be epistemic randomness, it must be ontological randomness. And this is the thing. You're saying we've observed and verified and validated that it is random. How? Where's your evidence for that?
Because it has been observed.
You've observed randomness.
Mutation happens with nilly-willy, without any sort of prior predictions.
No, you have to prove to me that it's not your lack of knowledge that makes it look random, but that it actually is random. You have to prove that.
Sorry.
Yeah, but he's the one making the claim, so yeah, great. Because this is the thing.
randomness, what we mean here in this discussion is something happened that by the natural laws, by something by
If it's been caused,
well, if it's in physics, if you say about random, quantum physics, and kind of that's a separate issue. But we're talking about here randomness is something. It's not external force.
Hang on, how is quantum a separate issue when the very molecules we're talking about operate under quantum rules?
Well, because this kind of randomness.
You understand that molecules work on quantum rules.
In physics, you know that this random is very hard to get that random, because slightest noise. Don't jump to the Allah. Don't jump to Allah. Slightest noise, external noise, will affect the randomness.
Right.
That
this is the point.
Exactly like quantum entanglement. Slightest noise.
What makes me laugh is you are the one with the god of the gaps. You have a god of the gaps.
Me? Now you're accusing me.
Yeah. It's hilarious because what you do is you say there's a layer beyond which you can't see the order, and you say, okay, everything underneath there is random. It's random. You're saying it's fundamentally random because you said randomness was the cause. Now, random, what did random used to be called? It used to be called Fortuna, because it's an ancient Roman god. So you have taken
when we say random here, what we're saying, what we're talking about is, do you understand the genetic drift, genetical drift?
Well enough, but it's not going to establish randomness.
For no reason, change came about.
You're claiming for no reason. Prove it. You make a claim. Prove it.
Lots of things. You just look around to see.
No, you keep claiming for no reason, and you have no basis for that.
Why peacock has got this long, elaborate tail?
Allahu alam. What's your reason?
It's not Allahu alam. It's not Allah. It's something called sexual selection. It's called sexual selection.
Yeah, this is.
It's not Allah. You see, that's the trouble. You're like typical Muslims. You have got Allah for everything.
Yes.
And you haven't got the answer for anything.
No, false. You don't understand how it works.
No. Science says this is a sexual selection.
No, I don't reject any observation of science whatsoever. I don't reject any of it. I still study physics. I got books on quantum mechanics in my bag. No, the problem you have is one of philosophical maturity, where you just simply don't understand the difference between theoretical maps and underlying reality. So for me, I'm just going to keep talking because you don't know how to stop it, right? For me, Allah did it is the highest level, right, which is full. You don't have any granularity underneath that. Everything else underneath that is just more granularity for the same thing, right? There is no such thing as an alternative description, right, where suddenly now Allah didn't do it, right? It doesn't make any sense. And if you ever were Muslim, you'd know that doesn't make any sense. Everything we find out about how Allah does it is just more detail on how Allah does it. But you are the one who made a positive claim that there is no reason for the mutations. You are making a positive claim that you have no evidence for, and you know you can't substantiate. You know this, but you're running from it. And you keep running to peacock feathers instead of admitting you're making an assumption that you have not only no evidence for, but you could not even in principle have evidence for it.
I ask you, what's the reason for? Because that's a disadvantage.
No. You're the one that made a positive claim that there was no reason. You made a positive claim there's no reason for the mutation. Substantiate your positive claim.
I gave you example.
No.
That's it. Allah.
No. You made a positive claim that the mutations are happen for no reason, that they're random. You made that claim.
Yeah.
I'm asking you to substantiate that claim. How are you substantiating the claim that the mutations are random?
Genetical drift.
How does that establish the claim?
I just give you example.
No,
why peacock has got this elaborate tail?
No, that's talking about a selection criterion afterwards. I'm talking about way before that, the mutation, before there's any, so you have the mutation, and then there's the differences in the selection, right? All of this stuff, irrelevant, because you're the one that claimed the mutation itself is random. It is crucial.
About as a result of mutation.
I don't think you're able to follow basic argument, right? The mutation, you claim the mutation is random. The mutation. Right. You claim the mutation is for no reason. Right. I'm asking you to substantiate that claim. You cannot go to the evidence that, for example, there was some selection criteria and the mutation survived is irrelevant. The claim you made is the mutation is without reason, that the mutation is random, and that I'm asking you to prove. You made a positive claim, prove it.
Okay, I'll prove it for you. I'll prove it to you. Why geese?
You can't start with why.
Okay. Why geese? They don't have this elaborate tail, and peacock have got that.
That doesn't say anything about the mutation being random or not.
What's the selection advantages of having these tails? Why?
Forget selection, because the mutation itself, right? When there's a mutation somewhere in the genome, you're claiming it's random. You're claiming it's not guided. That's where we differ.
Am I different from you?
Where we differ.
Let me just ask you this question.
Yes.
Am I different from you?
There are differences and similarities.
Physical,
we have some symmetries and some asymmetries. Yes.
We are different. How? Why?
What do you mean, how and why?
How am I different? Why I'm different? I'm a human being. You're a human being. We came from Homo sapiens. Why we are different?
It's such an open-ended question. I could talk about it for 10 hours.
We are different because when you're born, each of us, we born with 62, at least 62 mutations.
Yeah, that's one.
That's one of, and this.
That is one particular abstraction layer.
If you go back generation after generation, it brings up a variation. Mutation brings
this has nothing to do with whether or not the mutation is random.
Mutation brings about variation.
I understand all that, and even if I grant you all of that, it doesn't do anything for your claim that mutation is random, that there is no reason for it.
Yes.
I'm asking you to prove that claim, because this is fundamental, because this is the only difference. I believe that Allah knows the mutation and why He's doing it. You believe it's random with no reason, with no cause. How are you going to differentiate us? Everything else is irrelevant, so you've got to stop building up anything else.
Because loss of mutation happens for no reason.
How do you know? Prove it. This is why I'm asking you to substantiate. It's a faith position you have. Can you substantiate it with evidence?
It's called genetic drift. Do you understand what a genetic drift is?
Yes, I know, but
What is a genetic drift?
Genetic drift is when you have a genome and it's changing over time.
No.
Yes.
Genetic drift, it means when some genetic mutation for no reason happen.
Yeah.
And
not for no reason. No reason is something you're adding in. No reason is your article of faith.
With a different shape for no reason. That's a genetic drift. Genetic drift. It has got nothing to do with the natural.
The observation of drift is an entirely different thing to whether it's for no reason. Genetic drift does not require adding the assumption there's no reason to it. This is just your fundamental assumption because you're fundamentally rejecting Allah.
Which reason?
Huh?
Which reason?
You are the one that claimed the mutations are for no reason, that they are proved to be random, and you have not been able to establish that. You're not even able to answer the question or ask the question. The only difference between us, I agree with the observations. I agree with all this kind of stuff. I agree that you'll see speciation. The difference is I believe Allah made the changes for a good reason that we may not know, and that's why it may appear random. You believe you have evidence for that proves that it is random. So give me it. What is the evidence that it is random?
I gave you evidence, but
you didn't. You haven't given any evidence. No.
For some reason you don't understand.
No, you don't understand the question. You made the positive claim that it is without reason.
Why we have got all the different type of bird? Bird is a bird. They have to.
Because Allah decided to speciate things. Because Allah decided to use a drift. No, you can study the detail if you want to, but you fundamentally, the question is about your claim that the reason for the mutations there is none. And that is simply your article of faith. It is pure faith for which you have no evidence. And in that,
mutation brings about variation.
I agree. Of course it does. But I'm asking you about the mutation before the variation happens, before this thing has become a being that can then compete. Before any of that, you made the positive claim that the variations are specifically for no reason, that they're specifically random. And every time I ask you to prove that, you can't. And you can't even engage with the question. Because it's a pure article of faith.
Because you don't understand the
I fully do.
Because you don't understand the biology.
I fully do.
Because you don't understand
more than
why
enough.
we have got these variations.
No.
The variation
you said there's no reason. I'm asking you to substantiate that.
We have got 1,000 and 1,000 species of frog. Why?
All the different species. We're only talking about the mutation. You believe that the only difference between us...
But why mutation happens? Why?
Because Allah decides that it's the right mutation to make. You think it's random.
No.
You think it's random, I think Allah did it. Where's your proof? Where's your proof for the randomness?
Two different frog is living in
None of that has
ecological system, ecological thing.
None of that has anything to do.
Why we have got that thing? You just say Allah.
No, on the molecular level.
There's a mutation happens.
Where is your proof of the randomness on the molecular level? Where is it?
Well, the proof is there. It's up to you whether you.
No, you can't put any of the proof. Because all you're doing is keep going to speciation, which has nothing to do with whether or not the mutations are random.
Allah doesn't explain anything. Yeah, Allah doesn't explain
I'm not looking to explain things. I'm not picking Allah out of the sky to explain something. I'm just saying, no, we have different articles of faith. I have faith in Allah, you have faith in randomness, Fortuna, the Empress, right? Which is why you're a polytheist, and I'm a monotheist. But you don't realise you're a polytheist.
Anyway, it's been very nice talking to you guys. I live in Wollongong City, so I have to go back. Sorry.
Good. I know Welland very well. Have a think. If you can come up with any actual evidence, read it back. The point is about the mutation itself. Is it guided? Is it random?
Well, I studied that for about 10 years.
And unfortunately, it didn't help you in this question.
10 years, and I can assure you, I can assure you that mutation happens randomly,
You have no evidence for it.
Well, it's up to you.
It's an art. The point is, it's an article of faith, and if you recognise that, you'll make progress in yourself.
Your name is?
Islam Hakim.
Islam Hakim. Yeah, well.
This is my revert name. I had another name before. I used to be atheist, but I had a different name then.
Okay. Respect.
Okay.
Your religion. You take care. Bye-bye.
Someone. Someone put these on me. I don't know who they are. Anyone recognise them? I didn't see who was putting them on. Huh? Yeah. Ah, is that yours, brother? There we go. There we go.